WolfPunch.
So you are, yeah.
Yeah, I think I can. I've lost a bit of my voice, but.
Why is that, Kyle?
Well, it was New Year's Eve last night.
Happy New Year.
We're
from WolfPunch.
Yeah,
we started.
I was just.
Zane fucks fish.
Zane does fuck fish.
I thought we weren't going to add that.
We were going to keep your secret.
It's spontaneous.
But now,
now your shame is out there for people to listen to later.
Well, this is WolfPunch, and I'm Zane Parmiter. With
Fish
me
fucker.
is Fish fucker. Yeah, that's me, I guess. With me is Yezin.
Yeah.
Kyle.
Yo.
Dan.
Howdy.
And Kemp.
Hello.
Or Michael. Which one should I call you? I always call you.
Kelp.
Kelp.
Yeah.
Kelp.
No.
Michael.
No. Look at him blushing. Just.
I can't do that. That's awful. That's so mean.
We'll save that for The Shape of Water.
Anyway, today we are talking about Tonya.
No,
yeah.
I Robot.
I Robot with Will Smith, and that's basically
And Margot Robbie.
And Margot.
Again.
Wait,
no.
no, she's not in that.
No shit.
Oh,
Because they do movies together.
that's right. They do movies together.
Focus and Suicide Squad. Probably something else. I don't know. Go on.
Yeah. Anyway, I, Tonya is about the competitive figure skater Tonya Harding and her rise amongst the ranks at the U.S. Figure Skating Championships. And then she goes
to the Olympics.
Yeah, she goes to the Olympics. Her husband, pays somebody to beat her leg or beat her enemy's legs in.
To beat her leg.
What? Nancy Kerrigan? That's who it is. Yeah.
Did you watch the movie?
I did watch the movie, but I was bored the whole time. I told you that. I was just not into this movie because I've seen the 30 for 30 that ESPN did, and I thought it was much more interesting because it had everybody that was involved except for Nancy Kerrigan, and it was just that's much more interesting than this reproduction of it.
So it's one of those things where you think the real thing is just the movie didn't live up to the real thing.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to point out, you having said it is strangely hypocritical because you've confessed on multiple occasions that a dream of yours is to be a reenactment actor in the reenactment bits of Unsolved Mysteries.
Yes, but those are shit. They're awful.
So if there's work put into it, then it's bad.
Yes. Everybody knows that those are shit. That's shit entertainment.
They are.
Plus those
Unsolved
crimes,
Mysteries
they don't really make
broken.
movies about. Everyone knows for the most part somewhat this story. So you already have it in your brain, and then they put it on screen.
I didn't know any of this. I know I was alive for it.
That's crazy to me.
Believe it or not, I am not as informed about figure skating as I always pretend. I'm all talk.
I didn't know that much about it, but I knew that the event happened.
Yeah.
That was, as far as I knew, I thought Tonya Harding
I knew
beat some
very
girls'
big
kneecaps
things
in.
growing up. Yeah,
And that was it.
I was like, "Hey, mommy, who's that cute lady on TV?" And it's don't look up to her, son. And that was basically the extent of it.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that Margot Robbie is in this. Allison Janney, Sebastian Stan, and Bobby Cannavale. He was in this, or Cavalli.
Who's
Cannavale? I can't remember his.
Fuck 'em, who cares?
Speaking of cute ladies, Margot Robbie. Yeah. But I'll kind of go in with that too. That this happened kind of pretty long ago. This was probably the first news story I remember. The earliest news story. This is when I kind of zapped in and started making memories. I think I was probably 3 or 4 years old. Tonya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan had their feud, and Tonya Harding was the bad guy and Nancy Kerrigan was the good guy. So I knew about this, but I didn't know any of the details. Not because the information isn't out there, just because it was so long ago. But I will say that the movie definitely changes the script a little bit, and by that I mean they back then when it was breaking, something that even from my vague recollection, something that the movie also kind of repeats, is that sort of the news and NBC and CBS, whoever was showing the Olympics, NBC, kind of latched onto this as like a national drama. And in that national drama, like Tonya Harding was the villain and Nancy Kerrigan was the good guy. And so this movie, it takes Tonya Harding and actually makes her really sympathetic. And I think that's actually a really interesting thing that this movie does, that also I think maybe has become like a trend with a lot of other movies. Like they, I kind of compare this to The Wolf of Wall Street, not in that it makes Jordan Belfort a good guy, but
you root for him and you want him to make all the money.
Yeah, it takes.
You wanted to root for Tonya Harding in this movie? I hated her.
Oh no, I absolutely rooted.
No,
yeah, I rooted for her too. Like I very much do this.
You were rooting for the Winter Soldier. You're like, hit her hard.
No, it was very much like an underdog sports movie from like the beginning of it. That's how I viewed it. So like it turns into like almost like a Coen Brothers type like.
But the thing is I was listening to this lady who covered this whole incident when it happened, back in the 90s or whatever, and she talked about, and like this kind of changed my mind about the whole story, because I had seen the 30 for 30 before I heard this interview, and this lady was talking about how like she's always complaining about being the victim, and in the 30 for 30 she's complaining about being the victim and how the system's rigged against her and everything, and the skating figuration and everything, they all gave her the same chance that they gave everybody else. She just wouldn't play ball with them. And I get to a certain extent of like standing out, like the whole thing of her using the rock music and stuff instead of like classical music was to stand out and be different and stuff. But at a point where it's working against you, you have to like rein it in. And she wouldn't do that. Her and her mother were both very like against the system and against like conforming to the rules. People. And that's like fine, but like you would think like as competitors they would see this and be like, oh, okay, so they're responding negatively to this. For me to actually win, I would course correct and fall into what they want me to do with, you can do it with some attitude. You don't have to walk the line straight and narrow.
I mean, she definitely could have compromised more, I guess. But I don't think that makes me not root for her. I'm always rooting for any figure skater who has a jacket made out of bunnies.
I'm always rooting for any figure skater that's Margot Robbie. But the thing is, the movie doesn't shy away from that though. The movie doesn't shy away from the sense that she didn't want to change who she was. She didn't want to be like
no, I know that.
I think for her, it's like right or wrong. She believed it should just be about the skating, and she believed that she could win her own way. And the thing about movies like these, like we'll never really know the truth.
Yeah,
we'll never really know who was the good guy. And I even question how much is it this movie's responsibility to depict the truth.
Well, I think they did a good job at being an unreliable narrator, like with everyone like contradicting each other. Like that was something I did like about the movie.
It
was
even
like how
tells you that like right up front. There's a thing like these are actual interviews, but what they're saying is constantly at odds with each other.
Yeah. So I really like that. Like Winter Soldier hitting her. Like
Winter Soldier is the guy
Sebastian Stan,
Tonya Harding's husband,
Jeff Galooly.
Yeah,
he goes by Bucky.
That's what he goes
to be
by.
fair, he might as well go by Bucky in this movie.
And we should refer to him as such because it's very easy to say. Bucky.
I'm going to say Galooly. But
Galooly's way more fun.
I don't know. The thing about the movie is that it doesn't shy away from the fact that this is like a really imperfect, really flawed character, but I still root for her. I still kind of like you see the sense of how like they kind of turned this into like a national drama and how she was cast as the villain in it, and a lot of it was kind of built into her not fitting a certain mold. And whether that's true or not, that's the story the movie depicts. And in that story, like, Tonya Harding is sort of like this tragic hero, which is kind of just like...
I don't know if she's a hero.
She's for what? What's she?
I would... Well, I mean, hero just in that she's like a protagonist, I guess. Not in that she like saves people or does good things for other people. I mean,
Superman saves
the little
people.
girl at the end was pretty inspired there by it. But,
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm sure
Swinging
afterwards,
a
though,
baton
she
and-
was like, oh, shit. Yeah, no, never mind. Her parents were probably like, yeah, don't look up to her, sweetie.
Oh, I'm sure.
Like Dan.
Right.
Exactly.
That was
Dan.
Dan.
Actually. And that's why I never became a competitive figure skater.
He had his tutu on and his skates, and then he was like, I can't do it anymore.
Do a quadruple double axle.
God
You
damn
know?
I don't even know what that is.
I don't know either. Fuck it, who cares?
Would
But, you
that
know-
just be a quadruple axle? Or is it
Whatever.
8?
a quadruple
Double
asshole?
axles?
What?
Zane is WolfPunch's official figure skater expert.
I don't think so.
You know more than I
You're the
do.
only one that's watched a documentary on figure skating. So
That's true, I did.
So
and
you
it was
are the
dope.
expert
It was a lot better
based
than
off
this
of that.
movie.
I know. I think...
And I think if you watched it, you would change your mind severely.
Maybe.
Specifically, in what ways do you think it was better than the film?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's just like it's the actual people that were involved. First of all, that's the I guess because you see the same kind of contradiction in the stories from the actual people that are talking about it. Like, and Tonya Harding has this crazy chip on her shoulder the entire time through this interview, and it was I don't know, maybe 20 years after the fact, or 10 years after the fact, I guess. I don't when they filmed it. No, I think it was like 20 years after the whole thing happened, and
I mean, it's
she's still just like. The whole line that Margot Robbie has about when she was like, when Nancy Kerrigan got the silver medal and she was up there, like, she looked like she just stepped in dog shit or something like that. I'm pretty sure that line is like ripped exactly from that interview.
Several lines seem to be very shaping me. I mean, even the way certain people are depicted, like the fact that in all of the interview sequences in the movie, Allison Janney, who plays Tonya Harding's mother, has like a bird
On her shoulder, yeah.
That's the way that woman is in interviews. It's weird, but that's a thing.
Confident. I like it.
I don't know. I guess I haven't seen the documentary. I've seen actually half of a documentary, but not the one you're talking about.
It's here in the room with us. I forgot to introduce it.
But I think it might be a case of like apples and oranges for me. To me, I thought the movie was like well acted. I think Allison Janney does a great job.
There are a lot of terrific performances in the film.
Margot
The
Robbie does a good
performances
job. The guy who plays Jeff Galooly, and who's the guy who plays the bodyguard?
That guy was the Juggalo in the Lethal Weapon 5 episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He does blackface at the end of the episode and gets Charlie fired.
His name is Paul Walter Hauser. He played Sean.
Was my description not good enough?
It wasn't.
Go
No
to the
one.
internet? Look, if they don't know that episode of Sunny, they shouldn't be listening to this podcast.
Paul Walter Hauser does a great job, and so does Margot Robbie does a great job. Like, it's one of those things where like the movie is acted super well, and like it's one of those things where like Allison Janney as Tonya Harding's mother, like you kind of get who that mom is, and she's plays it so well, and she's also like terrifying. Like
quite possibly my favorite part in the whole movie is when her dad runs out on her and she's standing in the street, this little girl like yelling, "Don't leave, like you can't leave me here," and then her mom is just like standing in the doorway, like shrugs her arms and goes inside.
Yeah.
I was like, that was really fun.
I might be wrong. Has Allison Janney like played this role before?
It feels
though?
like she has.
It feels like
I think that's what she's like in real life.
Yeah, she wasn't even acting.
She didn't know that they were making years.
Because not that she didn't, like, she did a great job. Like, everybody's performances were really good. It's just that, I don't know, maybe...
I guess for me, I compare this to, like, a movie like The Wolf of Wall Street. And I said that before, and maybe I haven't seen it, but apparently it's kind of like Goodfellas.
It gives off a real like Scorsese like biopic.
It
vibe.
seems like a white trash Scorsese.
Yeah.
Which is like what we were kicking around the idea of earlier. And I fully agree with that. Like because it is like again like the underdog story, like the telling of this character's life. But it does turn into like more of a biopic when you find out like just how flawed and like fucked up they really are, and you know, how the situations they've gotten into are just so crazy. But having not seen like the documentary or anything, and only like having the recollection of what I heard in the news when I was super young, the thing about this movie that like struck me was the characters themselves, and just how like they introduced her as like a childhood and just the the uncomfortable level of like child abuse and violence against women that kind of showed you how like she became the character she is in the film. And I don't know if you guys had an opinion about watching that, but like some of those scenes like especially were just like I was not expecting like one of the introductory scenes when after she gets married to her husband, like he just like slams her head against the glass mirror and it breaks. It was just like there's a level of violence that is just I have not seen this regularly, and it was very surprising, especially for a film like this. But I don't want to deride that and say it's a negative against the film itself. I think it was just difficult to watch.
I would say that like comparing it to The Wolf of Wall Street, which for me is the best like benchmark I have for it. Like with The Wolf of Wall Street, the thing that stands out is just how extravagant and insane, because you know it's supposedly based on the true life of Jordan Belfort, and just the insane wealth and debauchery of his lifestyle and of the company that he ran is just astonishing. And that's what I watched that movie for, is that like a lot, I mean, yeah, the performances are good, and Margot Robbie happens to be in that movie too, and she's real good in that. But more than Leo's performance, what I watch it for is just the debauchery and the insanity. With this, it's kind of quieter, and it's more of a character piece. It's more about watching.
Plus, the debauchery is, less glamorous. It's not a lot.
Yeah,
it's people in a trailer, like you're saying.
I mean,
it's
if
watching
you laugh,
the
if you
honeymooners.
laugh at this movie, it's because you're uncomfortable. Like it's not because like, oh, it's so funny he did cocaine and now it looks like Popeye and like Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
And this one, it's like, oh, she's shooting a shotgun at like her husband. Like, oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But, like,
I mean, I could be wrong. I feel like this movie could have used a little bit more humor in it, and I feel like they could have learned something from like 3 Billboards, where they have like a similar like thing. What was that?
nothing.
Dan was making some sort of gesture. I don't know.
I believe it was a shotgun that he was putting in his mouth.
Okay.
Because he does not like that movie.
No, he doesn't.
Not enough.
Anyway, but I feel like they could have used more of that kind of like, I don't know, rough humor,
dark humor.
I don't know if well, go on. I don't know.
With just the way, because I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't super serious, but it wasn't funny either. So it was kind of like I didn't know what to make of it. I really was kind of just it kind of was so middle of the line between the two that I was just like, it was trying to be a little bit more not funny, but like the way it was shot made it seem like it was more like light-hearted in a way.
Yeah,
I felt like it was lighthearted going into the film, and then like the violent aspects of it kept popping up, and that's where it crept into uncomfortable territory for me.
Well, they just kind of like gloss over it because like the character would break the fourth wall and like address the camera, and then that always felt really weird to me.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because it's like I don't necessarily agree with the idea that I'm losing my voice. Don't necessarily agree with the idea that the movie needed more humor. I thought parts of it were fairly funny.
If it had more humor, I think it would have to be very particular in how it was used.
Yeah.
Because it could become crass very, very
Yeah,
easily.
certain things you don't want to laugh at. But also, like, it bothers me that, like, she's got that shotgun and she's like, I never did this, like, talking to the audience.
Yeah.
And it's like, they either need to do that more or less.
Or just don't do it at all.
More or don't do it at all, because the amount that it's in there, you're like,
Well,
Yeah,
this
I
is
think
really
that's a
weird.
The shotgun scene
Way to
didn't
put it.
bother me. What really got me was when the mother, like later on in the movie, she in one of the interviews, she's like, "Well, my story is disappearing right now. What the fuck?"
Yeah.
That was like where it really like got to like wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and like going back to this fourth wall breaking thing, and that's part of this too, is that like it's either these are interviews in the future that are narrating the past that we're seeing, not like the combination of the two talking to people. Like when she's training to like get back to the Olympics or whatever, and her trainer starts addressing the fourth wall.
Oh, yeah.
and
She
says
really
like,
did this.
she really did this and this and this. And it's like, why? Why do I need to know that? Why did they think it was important that I know that she trained like Rocky?
In Rocky 4.
Yeah, sure.
Before. I mean, it's a stylistic choice played. I think mostly for comedy.
But it wasn't.
To, like,
Is that funny though?
No,
that they were pointing it out.
Fine.
I took no issue with it. Like I didn't laugh. I was kind of like, I mean, it's basically a bit that they're doing in the film.
Yeah, I just feel like that either should have been a thing that they did more or just get rid of it.
Yeah.
I think it could have been done more, but I don't know so much that that's something that really. Like,
It's weird. It stands out.
No, it is weird.
It's a narrative thing. I get really picky about. Like, I completely agree. It's way worse when Allison Janney mentions that
Just
her storyline is
Yeah,
disappearing.
that was the only part that had jumped out and kind of just felt like I was being slapped in the face by it.
I guess to me it didn't interfere with the movie. I think that like a movie like this is just more about like I guess the presentation of it and sort of like
that's part of the presentation of it. That's literal.
Right,
that's the literal
when I say
presentation.
I guess when I say presentation, I mean more in terms of like how like what they're like. I guess when I say that presentation, like that to me is just a presentation choice in terms of like, oh well, we're doing this in terms of like sort of we're breaking the fourth wall a little bit. It's not something that I get overly like picky about, I guess.
Well, then what do you mean by presentation?
Well, see, that was like the selling point for me. Was like when I saw the trailer, I was like, "Oh, look, they break the fourth wall," and like it's kind of like
They felt very much like
Little bit
trailer
more-
moments.
Yeah.
Sprinkled in throughout the movie, and that might have been the intent. But personally, I think it just kind of helps reinforce the tone of it being like conflicting stories, and you almost don't even know like what to believe because I mean these are very biased statements that you're getting from different narrators, and so things tend to crash and conflict in ways that could be confusing, could be weird.
Well, I think that like you could do that with the voiceover stuff, like and hearkening back to those those mock interviews that they have cut throughout the movie, like even cut to one of them, like she actually did this,
I mean,
or like
they were just trying to integrate it into the filming itself, man.
Yeah.
The characters.
But like I think Kyle and I are
We get it.
we got it. We're on the same
I
page.
guess in my memory, those really only happened in montage type moments.
Mm-hmm.
Like they exclusively had
not really.
in different
Outside of the
times,
mother's interview, I think the rest did feel very much like
I mean like they happen in the interview moments that are happening in the because they're obviously addressing the camera because they're interviewing the camera and
that I wasn't counting.
the
I was
other
counting
times
weird-
it happens are only to me from what I remember at least they're only in like montage moments, like moments where it's like just like kind of montages of her husband hitting her and her fighting her husband, or moments of her training, or just like moments of her practicing. Like they didn't.
Well, the
they
training
didn't.
and the practicing is not montage. That's most of the movie at times. It's her training and practicing. It
I
wasn't
guess-
like
I
a
guess
Rocky montage. And that's why it
There
doesn't-
weren't. I guess there
stand
weren't
out.
scenes of like. Well, I guess there was the scene in the cop car, but again, these are all like kind of like small things that I don't really when watching a movie like this like kind of aren't what I really focus on. I guess it's more like for me I'm interested in like how they took like this figure like from the 90s who kind of had a bad run and became like a national villain, and then they took them and they sort of like represented them like presented them in like a new way, and I'm just kind of interested in like how like what that says about the way like media like uses people as like part of a story, and so like sort of like the way.
See, I feel like they could have done more with that.
Yeah.
That's not.
But see,
But
a
I
big part
think
of this
I think that's like kind of the core of the movie. Like, I mean, they could have been maybe more overt with it, but like I to me when I was watching the movie, that's like the main core of what I got. I was like, all right, well, here's a movie about how like we sort of take these like athletes or like and it
Well,
really
I'm
goes.
saying, as someone who did not know anything about this story, I'm not aware of how much the media demonized Tonya Harding.
Right.
So it's like I don't really see that a lot in this movie.
She was going to like send death threat letters to this woman, and you guys like feel bad for her.
Well, here's the thing, like
Who doesn't love a good joke?
This is
All right?
insanity.
Yeah, actually.
No, she's a bad that is unsportsmanlike and just terrible. Like, why? Because she can't beat her, she's gonna send her death threat letters. There's also in that 30 for 30. Sorry, I keep referencing this because I keep going back to it. There's just like a lot of stuff that points to her having known that like something more was probably going to go down.
See, and that's the thing with like my issue I ended up having with the movie was like when the movie, like as we said earlier, like the movie kind of tries and makes her sympathetic. And at the beginning, I was like feeling like, oh yeah, I feel bad for her. Oh, I hope she like wins and like pulls through or whatever. But as the movie kept going on, I like slowly realized that I didn't, because of all the unreliable narration, I didn't know who to believe. And whenever I started thinking like, oh, maybe she didn't know about the plan and she really was set up. And then I was like, well, that could just be unreliable narration, and I'll never know. So what do I have to hold on to then if it's all unreliable narration? And I had nothing. I didn't give a crap.
I don't know if the movie is about like making like that kind of a definitive statement. Like
no,
like when we talk about
that, like I didn't care.
When we talk about like how much she knew, like I mean, there's also stuff that the movie left out. Like there's also like part of Tanya's story that she was under like much more like physical threat around that time from her husband, which is, I
feel like it goes into that quite a bit though.
Yeah,
no, it's like the bulk of it.
There's a lot of movies.
I mean, without getting there is some stuff that the movie didn't touch really. Some like really gritty.
You can say it. Children aren't going to listen to this. If it's rape, just say rape.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
we can say rape here.
I don't know. I guess
look at the smiles on.
I mean, I'm just like I'm laughing because
I'm not like not getting into it out of like censorship. More so because I don't really think that's the point. I think that with this, it's more about like how we take these like figures, whether they're athletes, whether they're politicians, whether they're actors, something like that. And like sort of like don't really understand like what the kind of lives they live, and the media sort of presents sort of like a fairy tale presentation. Like they boil them down to a certain narrative. Like Nancy Kerrigan at the time, like they boiled her down to this like princess narrative, and Tonya Harding, they boiled her down to this sort of like
I understand what
this
you're saying.
unlady like kind of like villain narrative. And
they
then,
presented that, but they didn't delve enough into it.
They didn't do a whole lot with any of that.
Yeah,
like they talk about Nancy Kerrigan in like one quick scene where she was like, "Don't get me wrong, she was shitty like me," and that was it. Other than that, she's not even a character.
Yeah, she's like a shadow.
I guess for me, that's the whole subtext of the movie. For me, anyway.
Well, because you didn't know about it.
No, but more just so because that's what I thought about the whole time I was watching the movie. Is that like, okay, so like we're taking these figure skaters, and their lives are like totally like their lives are completely dedicated to a sport. So of course they're uneducated. Of course they're not well adjusted because they're not living normal lives like us. They're living weird.
I think it was just this one case.
No, that's like a thing with a lot of Olympic athletes is that they make them train like crazy. Like they don't live normal lives. They don't. I mean, definitely Tonya Harding's case seems to be an extreme. But even like now, like what we hear about, like a lot of them have like better representation from like the U.S. Olympic. So they're sponsored a lot better. With Tonya Harding, I couldn't imagine like she was doing all that training, and yet she was fucking poor as hell.
That was an interesting part of this.
Like I never
was like wrapping my head around.
I never like sort of even imagined the idea, and that's something that the movie kind of opened me up. I've never imagined the idea of a poor world class athlete because I was like all the world class athletes they have now. Their lives are definitely all training, but they put them up in like nice places. Yeah. They sponsor them. They have money, and them having all of those needs met is what allows them to be that insanely good at a sport. With Tonya Harding in this movie, like the way the movie depicted it anyway, she was poor as fuck. She didn't have any of her
But
basic
don't you
needs
think
met.
that goes back to what I was saying before about like she wasn't willing to like play ball with these people, and she had all the talent in the world and everything, but because she didn't want to skate to classical music, like that's why she didn't have like sponsors. That's why, because she wasn't like, you know, how they say in the movie, like wasn't the image they want to like promote or whatever. Like you would think like sink or swim, she would be like, okay, well, I better play ball if I want to be the best.
Yeah, there's that, but then there's also the system needing changed, and you think about all the people who
it can evolve.
have
Like
done
you can do it in a less
perfect world,
abrasive
Mike.
way.
I mean,
She could have done it in a less abrasive way.
again,
Is what I'm saying.
it's not really necessarily about saying that I agree or disagree with Tonya Harding. Like, yeah, I get it would be smarter to do that, but she wasn't smarter.
Sure, I get
like
that's
no
like
education.
she had no. It's not just that she had no education, but like
It was a joke.
No, but it's true. She didn't really have it. She dropped out.
I know she didn't. I was just saying that
Yeah.
as a joke. You don't have to.
Well, when you explain that you're
But
making a
it-
joke, it makes a joke.
I think it makes it funnier
Yeah,
Oh, definitely.
if you explain that a joke is a joke.
that's right. Jokes are funnier when we explain them to you. But no, it's good because that's an important point. Like what you say about like, well, why didn't she play ball? That's true. Like the smarter thing would have been to play ball, but it's not just that she
She
doesn't
wanted to skate was the thing. She didn't want to play ball.
She wanted to. God damn it.
But this is like
No, but what I'm saying is it's
Oh,
not that that's not the smarter thing. It's that's not who she was.
I get that.
She wasn't. It's like a really tall order to tell someone who is a certain way and was like raised a certain way. Hey, be different. Pretend you're like a different person.
Sure.
That doesn't sound so much as like criticism of the film itself. It's just like an
No, we're just talking about.
Yeah, yeah. It's a
talking about. Well, yeah, but I am talking about like in terms of the film. I can't like. I don't feel bad for this person when they're not willing. Like if she really wanted this, like she would have done. I mean,
She obviously really wanted it. She wanted it like breaking knees level.
Yeah, there's like
Or not
two
technically.
ends of the spectrum. She's like willing to like send death threat letters to this person,
Hell yeah.
but she won't skate to classical music.
Well,
Like,
she did
that's-
eventually.
she
It was
did
just on the
eventually, yeah,
first
I get
try,
that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that like that's like a point of contention throughout her career.
She
in
wanted
the
to,
beginning.
She wanted to prove that she was the best,
Sure,
and I think she wanted to prove that
skating she might
was
be, but that doesn't
she
mean
was the
anything.
best.
No, it's
Like,
like, I mean, you gotta appreciate that drive of being like, the whole world doesn't want me, but they can't change the fact that I'm good. And it's like, you kind of, I kind of get swept up in that.
I
Where it's
can
like,
get that.
they don't like me because I got my bunny jacket, but like I can
And I'm
skate
not
better
saying
than anyone.
like
They
sell
can't
out
keep me out.
who you are or anything. I'm saying
That's
like
kind of like I mean
That's
they
selling
only imply it in the movie, but in the documentary I saw, like the U.S. like figure skating like institution or whatever association pressured her to go back to her abusive husband. Like they definitely were pressuring her to be.
oh,
They wanted that family.
They
yeah,
were
and that's-
pressuring her to
They
be
don't get it.
someone
They
that
never
that's-
ate chili out of a Cool Whip container. They
That's
don't know
the
how to
part-
live.
That's the part that I don't agree with. But like the actual, when it comes to the actual competition, like she was a really
Well,
great.
no,
You're asking
But
like
she
why
did do
doesn't
the
she?
stuff.
Why didn't
Like,
she just?
She got
dance
the better
more
outfit that
gracefully?
they wanted. She changed the music.
But
like
after,
she did.
but like
that was
that
only
was
one
deep.
scene that she
That
did.
was deep. And no, I'm talking. This is her whole career.
I know, but I'm saying like
Like,
for a while, yeah,
up to
she
this
was
one
doing
point.
the rock music and wearing what she could. But then eventually, like whenever she was like successful, she was playing ball. It was just then the family image, and
I think on some level it's kind of good that the movie doesn't make her too uncontroversial. They don't make her completely. I mean, definitely because that's the way she really was. But the movie doesn't just make her like, oh, fully perfect character
Yeah.
in a bad system. Like, yeah,
Right.
she's flawed. She definitely did some shitty things.
yeah,
So on some level, like, yeah, you're not totally wrong. Like in some level, she is like, I shouldn't say you're right in a lot of ways. Like she's not she didn't make all the right decisions. She made a lot of wrong decisions.
And I mean, it just seems in her character to be like stubborn and diehard, just like her mom with how she was raised in her upbringing, to not want to conform, to like go up to the judges and be like, "Hey, suck my fucking dick," you know, like I'm not going to do this like the way you want to. And for me, that was more of a strength of the film than anything else. I mean,
I
can't speak of how she did or what actually happened in real life in the documentary, but just in the context of the film itself, that was one of the points I thought it handled rather well.
I wonder if you watching that documentary has ruined your enjoyment of the movie.
It did, and that's why I didn't want to be in this one.
Well, no, you gotta be in.
No, I like that because it makes it more interesting to have someone to fight.
Don't get me wrong, I didn't love the movie, but I feel like that jaded you.
Oh, it did.
That 30-40 jaded you.
Real hard, and I didn't want to. Yeah.
It is a question of like how these kinds of films, these like biopic films, hold up to the real thing. Definitely, like like there's all sorts of movies that are about real life events. Like, what's it like to watch a movie about something as opposed to having lived through it and seen it on the news and like sort of like now I'm talking about like more like like movies that are about like a larger like scandal or something like that. What's it like to live through it and like every day kind of get news updates and not know what's going to happen, as opposed to knowing about it from history and then knowing how it ends and then just watching a movie that kind of like illustrates it. So that definitely there is, when you do this movie, it is kind of a tableau or like an illustration of someone's life, and you kind of, there's a tension between being faithful to the actual events and making it an entertaining movie.
Dramatic license.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, I don't think, like, that's the thing. Like, when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, it looks like they took the story that I probably wouldn't have that much interest in, that was a big deal. And the way it was shot, at least it portrayed in the trailer, I was like, oh, this looks interesting. Like, I like the way it's going to be presented. And then when I actually sat down and watched it, it didn't meet my expectation, like, as far as anything interesting with the way it was shot or presented to me.
See, I do agree with that. Like, I knew nothing about any of this crap, but like I saw the trailer and I was like, no, this looks like a fun, wacky movie. I could sit through this. And then I watched it, and I was like, this is taking forever.
Yeah. It was just like kind of a paint by numbers kind of thing to me.
Like the halfway point where the whole Nancy Kerrigan incident happens, where she gets hit in her leg. And it kind of feels like that should be like the start of the third act, not like the midway point of the film.
Yeah.
I was also surprised how early that came, but I wasn't let down by that. I actually really liked having more time with that.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree to an extent. Like, I enjoyed watching it, but like I think on like a repeat viewing it would drag a bit more. But it did benefit it in the overall sense of the film, because I mean, even the closing shot, or one of the last scenes where she's in front of the judge and she's being sentenced and everything, that was actually like one of the most like poignant scenes for me of the whole thing, when she's basically begging him to go to prison so she can still escape and not be banned from like.
That's where it gets you, Wayne.
See,
It really did not.
Honestly,
It didn't.
that scene should have gotten me, but I was checked out by that time.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
invested.
Oh, yeah.
Like before that, like I think the most poignant scene, like, man, Margot Robbie's facial expressions in this are great. Like, great acting.
Yeah.
But I think the last time, like, I was actually like feeling for her character was when she was putting on like that blush or whatever and getting really emotional.
That was intense.
Yeah, like that was really intense. Like whenever she did the triple axel, right? The first time, that was really intense. Like,
jump.
like that was intense. But like by the time like the verdict was coming around, like I was kind of like, oh, like I don't really care because I don't know what's true.
Fellas.
So I was just like,
let me explain something to you now. As an athlete, in the year 2018, now that I do yoga and I understand the dedication that goes into being
Is
active.
that a sport?
It will be.
Competitive yoga.
Competitive yoga. I was competing the entire time.
I mean, is figure skating a sport?
Yeah.
Namaste.
Podcast part 2. All right, sorry, go on.
I'm just saying, like, you see how much of her life has just been dedicated to, like, she didn't get an education.
Sure.
Her mother was very unpleasant to her. Like, her whole life is skating. And it's like, to get that taken away for the rest of your life, that irks me, where I'm like, I'd beat the shit out of that judge. Then what? Then what? At least you get.
Then you would go to jail, and you would be.
Doesn't matter.
You would never be able to escape.
You hurt him the way he hurt you.
Then she becomes a boxer, and every woman she boxes is that judge probably, or Nancy Kerrigan. I don't know.
I'm
Or both.
pretty sure that didn't last very
strange
long though,
hybrid.
too.
Judge Kerrigan.
I will say this though, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but after like the whole sentencing scene, that being like so poignant, I almost wish the film would have just like cut the credits right there. Because, I mean, yeah, it follows up with, like, her after years, like, boxing and whatnot. But it almost kind of seems like it undermined a little bit, being that, like, I mean, yeah, it's true life, but, like, oh, now she's married and has a kid, and it seems like she has a steady, normal job. It wasn't just, like, almost like a more romanticized.
You consider,
drop into
like,
decay.
boxing as a steady normal
No,
job?
she gets one half.
She
of that.
wasn't.
Oh, you mean
she
what happens
wasn't.
after?
Basically, she didn't end up being a Walmart greeter for the rest of her life, which almost kind of feels like the trajectory, which like the plot was like dabbing her in the context of the movie.
See, I don't know. When I saw like her as a boxer getting the snot beat out of her, I feel like that worked because I just felt really bad. Where I'm like, man, your whole life, big old pile of shit, you know. And I feel like that's what they were going for, and it worked. Where it's like, I agree. Like Tonya Harding, I don't know her personally, doesn't seem like the best person. I don't think I would like hanging out with her.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that I didn't feel sorry for her.
But that's the thing with the movie is that
How can they ban you from figure skating?
Tonya Harding is
Well, I'm like-
Tonya Harding's a person who if I met in real life.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
She's
I understand that.
Like,
who are they?
If I was like if I met Tonya Harding in real life, or even if I met Tonya Harding in real life when she was a figure skater, like back then, I mean I was a baby, but I was a toddler. But I'm saying like if me now met Tonya Harding now, I don't think I would be like that. This person is weird and rude and I probably wouldn't like them that much. But like it made me feel really bad for this person, and I think the movie
If
was
this
really
happened
successful.
today, I'm pretty sure it would, like, everybody would be against
Because
Tonya Harding.
the media, man, that fake news.
But
telling
no
you
one would be
everything.
saying that right now. None of
No.
you would be saying that.
No, there'd be plenty of hipsters out there going to the counterpoint just for the sake of making a counterpoint.
Sure, but I don't think.
I don't think what people would or wouldn't be saying is necessarily a question of who's right, though.
I don't even.
I'm not saying anyone's right or wrong though.
I don't even understand why knee breaking is against the rules in the first place.
I mean,
That's your
Because it's
competition.
not hockey.
Anything to win.
ass.
Anything to win.
Okay, Kemp, would you recommend this?
No, it was too middle of the road. Like, wasn't anything. It was lackluster. It was nothing special, but it
I
wasn't
am right
awful.
there with you. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Great. Now why don't you two kiss instead?
Will you get out first?
No, I do want to see it.
Weird. Like, that's weirder.
We've seen Get Out.
Good lord.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
oh boy.
How about you, Yazin?
I almost want to go last, but this is a weird one where I'm definitely like by far the most positive about this movie, because I definitely recommend this movie. I think it's really good. I think it's well acted. Margot Robbie does a great job. Allison Janney does a good job, and then Bucky Barnes does a good job. But then everyone else really just hits it out of the park. This is a movie where I think a lot of people, and myself included, kind of walked in expecting like a wild, crazy ride. Expecting something a little bit more rambunctious and like fun and goofy. And so, yeah, I was expecting sort of like a Wolf of Wall Street of figure skating. I was expecting like all these. Can you believe she did this crazy thing and said this crazy thing and was this batshit insane? And like I was expecting everyone to be crazy, except, well, I mean, definitely the bodyguard. He was
He was the only one making sense.
He really was.
He was the only one delivering on the promise of like a crazy out there movie. But though the movie does have moments of that, I think this is actually not that kind
He
of.
feels the most out of place by the end of it, where you're like, this guy is
Yeah,
Didn't
it feels
seem
way too goofy.
like,
He didn't seem.
And
like a
he's one where I
playboy
wonder, was he really that crazy? Because it seems like he actually was.
I don't know.
Well, the last bit during the credits, when they have the real interviews with the actual people that
Oh, I didn't
were
stick
part of
with
this. Oh yeah, well, they showed his interview, and yeah, he was talking about having training in special forces and fucking counterterrorism and shit, and it was just like, you're fucking delusional.
No, that guy was. But anyway, the point is that I think that this movie actually does something a lot deeper and more subtle, which is it kind of is a character piece that makes us like rethink like the way we kind of judge other people despite not really knowing their circumstances and their upbringing, and kind of then we sort of use them for the story, and we kind of like, and then we just kind of throw them away and move on to the next thing. I thought that was the most poignant aspect of the movie, is that Tonya Harding's whole life was dedicated to figure skating, and she was poor and she was abused through her whole life. And then at the end, and the country sort of used her for this like national drama, and then kind of just threw her away, and then she had nothing and she couldn't skate anymore or anything like that. And then everyone just moved on to O.J. Simpson, and I remember that. And I remember watching that on the news. And it's sort of like a thing where like we don't. It just sort of made me. I kind of think about like almost like rethinking being overly like judgmental, almost, of like other people and of other people's experiences.
Well, and the movie was worth it. It had a profound impact on the way you perceive people.
Yeah, because I'm really judgy. I'm like a really judgmental person, and like watching it, I was like, damn, because like she, you know, that was her whole life, and it just kind of boils down to like a big spectacle that she's just kind of used unfairly, and then like it's actually cool to know that person got redemption through the movie, I guess. Pop culture redemption.
I don't think she got
redemption not in the sense that like just in the sense that like
she got her story told.
She got her story told.
But I feel like, was it her story though? Like,
I think this
she had part, like,
more than anything.
I think
this felt like
this movie is
it
more
definitely
than
felt like her
anything
story.
previously her
It's
story.
not called I Nancy, all right? It's like I Nancy.
Good Lord. How about you, Kyle?
You know what? I don't know. I don't have any problem with anything that Yezin's just said. I just don't know if the movie definitely doesn't have the same impact on me that it did him.
No.
And I feel like a lot of the stuff that you liked about the movie could have pushed more. I would say that I would recommend this movie to people interested in the Tonya Harding story, but then Zane is like a perfect example of why that's wrong, because he was interested and didn't like the movie.
I did not. Yeah, no, I was interested in the movie, but
so I don't care if people watch it or not. Then let me put it that way. Do or don't. It's not a bad movie. It's worth seeing for the acting, I guess.
Yeah, the acting.
Sure.
So you could just watch clips of that.
Yeah, that's true.
I think I'm much more in line with Yezin's opinion of the film overall. I didn't love it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. The parts that really stuck out for me, obviously, like the acting, the performances, but really just the characterization, especially of Tonya, and how she seems more of a victim of circumstance than anything else. Like, especially even like the little girl at the very start, how she's just like totally cute and is a little figure skater. And like her mom's making her skate until she has like wet herself and stuff. Like,
you just start laughing.
Wow.
Sorry.
It's hilarious.
I used to say it wasn't funny
He
enough.
loves Pete.
But I can't be.
As noted, it was not played for comedy in the film itself,
No.
but there's lots of moments like that are, I guess I would put as challenging, just things I was absolutely not expecting, because we all expecting a little bit different from the trailer going into it. It's definitely not like a fun comedic romp, but it's definitely an interesting film, especially given that the director's only other films are like the Fright Night remake and then a Disney underdog movie that no one saw, $1 Million Arm with like John. Did anyone actually see that?
No, we joked about it a lot.
We made a lot of jokes about $1 Million Arm.
So basically, this guy's only made movies that people have joked about or not seen. And the fact
It's not
that,
Fright Night.
Well,
Yeah, but I've also joked about it.
Yeah, we joked about that.
right. I mean, yeah, so I think it's interesting that the director was able to pull off a film that felt like so dramatically poignant in so many moments and got like great character actors or actions out of so many people in the film. So from that aspect, I think it's really interesting and worth watching if that would be something that would appeal to you.
It does feel more like a triumph now, knowing their previous work.
Yeah, right. Like, dang, how did he pull this off? I mean, this
Right.
is pretty good. Considering.
He was actually on the set of
Considering.
Wolf of Wall Street, just taking furious notes the whole time.
The director was Craig Gillespie.
Obviously, we knew that.
Duh.
We just said it.
Such a household name.
Yeah, clearly. And it was written by Steve Rogers. So.
Yeah, Captain America wrote
Yes,
it. $4.
clearly.
Yeah.
That's why.
I actually forgot about that. I was going to make that joke because I saw it in the credits. Completely forgot. A lot has happened since then.
Well, yeah, obviously. So, well, I
I'm
guess
glad you guys got something out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't get anything out of it.
I'm going to go back to being judgmental.
Well, I figured you would. Yeah. Well, I guess that pretty much wraps it up. Join us next time. I think the next one we're going to review is Lady Bird.
Or all the
Jumanji, like he said.
Oh, Jumanji.
Jumanji.
Yeah, that's
All the
right.
Money
The
of the World.
3-part review
I don't
of
know.
Jumanji.
Until then, break a leg.
Or
Take you guys
Oh my god.
I thought you were just having a sign off.
All right, yeah, we just got rid of that. Break a leg was
Worth it.
Break a Leg was good, though.
God, we shouldn't have done anything else. We're just
No, we
ruining it
definitely
more.
Yeah, no, we'll cut
We're
all of this.
We're going to cut all
We're
of
gonna end it
this.
on break a
Nah,
leg.
leave all of it.
Yeah. No,
That's
we'll,
We're proud of our mistakes.
we'll,
All right,
we'll
just-
leave it.
We're done.
Yeah.
WolfPunch.